Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's study. Now, normally Dwight would be here, but his mom's in the hospital and he had to stay. He said he was going to stay probably mostly overnight. So obviously they need our prayers, him and his mom. And so I'm going to be doing two presentations. But before we begin, can you join me in a word of prayer? Dear Father in heaven, we are so grateful for the Sabbath and for the fellowship that we have through your Spirit, and that we can communicate with people around the world, and that you can teach us. We pray for Dwight and his mom. We ask for your healing hand to be upon her, and that you can help Dwight in the trials that he faces. We know, Lord, that there is a purpose in all things. Some things are extremely painful and difficult to go through, but we know, Lord, that you are always there. We ask that you can be here now as we open your word together, and as we look at the history of how you have worked in the past and what it shows for what you want to do in our lives today. So we invite your Spirit to speak to our hearts, and those that are watching these videos, that they can be encouraged, strengthened, comforted, and instructed, and that we can be corrected of all errors we may have in our understanding, and that we can glorify your name. Thank you again for the Sabbath and the precious time that we spend with you and with each other. And we pray and thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Good morning. Happy Sabbath. So last week in our symbolic use of numbers, we were looking at the relationship between the prophecy of Revelation 9, verse 15, specifically. The four angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour, a day, a month, and a year for to slay the third part of men. And we know that this is it's under the sixth trumpet, and it's going to be the second woe. Now, I want to look at a couple of things. So, the purpose of these studies here is the understanding of the symbolic use of numbers. That's what this series is entitled. And we're looking back at how we understood things in the past and how these symbols developed, how we came to understand how to apply these symbols. Now, we know that in Revelation 9, that Josiah Litch used this prophecy to predict the fall of the Ottoman Empire. And it's not something that's well accepted in Adventism today. Now, obviously, there are those who believe in the Bible and Spirit of Prophecy, who take Ellen White's statement regarding Josiah Litch's prediction that it was a fulfillment of prophecy, and to them that's good enough. There are others who don't accept Ellen White's statement, so they don't take it as a fulfillment of prophecy. They take her statement, and I'm going to read the statement here. Now, this is in for some reason, I found this quote. I didn't find the one I was looking for. So why not? Well, this one is basically the quote, but it's just in Maranatha. But it's also in the Great Controversy. But I'll show you this here. Okay. So this is the Ottoman Empire and Prophecy, May 24th, in the Book of Maranatha. Right, so that's where the reference is. And this is the verse that we've been looking at. Loose the four angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates, and the four angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour, a day, and a month, and a year, for to slay the third part of men. Revelation 9, verse 14 and 15. The history of nations that one after another have occupied their allotted time and place, unconsciously witnessing to the truth of which they themselves knew not the meaning, speaks to us. To every nation and to every individual of today, God has assigned a place in his great plan. And we have to keep that in mind, that this isn't just about nations, all of this stuff that we do with chronology, that it reaches down to our individual lives, to the events that occur in our lives. And we're going to look at some of these things in my life personally, as they relate to the lines that occur within this movement, and to understand why God does it this way. I do a study Friday morning, every second Friday, I guess, with a brother from Vietnam. And usually those studies I don't post on my YouTube page. One is because, I'm addressing his questions, which probably other people would benefit from. But also I end up talking about a lot of personal things that I wouldn't generally post on YouTube, because he asked me lots of personal questions, things about my life and so forth. So I generally wouldn't post those on YouTube. But we did a study yesterday morning, and it was very interesting. And so some of those things I'm going to share here this morning. But the idea that that God has assigned to every nation and to every individual of today, God has designed a place in his great plan. And so God has a place for you and I in his plan. And we talked yesterday about organization and about the body of Christ. Now, we're all connected to the head. The head is the thing that guides and directs the parts of the body. But often, parts of the body, at least in an unhealthy body, seek to have a higher honor or place than they should, and criticize other parts of the body. And so the body is in a schism. If your body's in a schism, it's not a healthful thing. It's what we would call disease. So if you have your immune system attacking your body, that would be the body in a schism. So we know that God has a purpose and a place. And for us as individuals, to understand how God leads us as individuals is extremely important. That he leads us not with us knowing all of the steps of our lives and every significance of what's going to happen. He leads us on step by step. His word is a light to our feet, right? A lamp unto our feet, a light unto our path. And as we walk with God, he gives us guidance and direction. And we have things along the way that we can be sure that he is leading us, that we're on the right path. So it doesn't mean that we know everything or we know the end of what those things are, but we have to faithfully do the things that God asks us to do. And so the choice is whether it's of a nation, whether it's of an individual, these choices that we make on a day-to-day basis are what determine our destiny. And now this next part is interesting as well. Today, men and nations are being measured by the plummet in the hand of him who makes no mistake. Now we know the line and the plummet go together. So the line is a line of judgment, and the plummet, that's a waymark. That's as righteousness, and that's from precept upon precept, line upon line, in Isaiah 28, right? So we're familiar with that. I'm just going to quickly go to the verse. Judgment, that's 28 verse 17. So that has all the digits of July 18, 2020. If you go backwards, it's July 18-2, right? If that makes sense. Isaiah 28:17. Judgment also will I lay to the line, and righteousness to the plummet. And the hail shall sweep away the refuge of lies, and the waters shall overflow the hiding place. So, and the hail, of course, represents the coming of Christ. It's the seventh plague, and the waters represent judgment in this case. Waters can represent people, but they can also represent judgment because they can be nations that come in. They can be represented as water, and the overflowing represents the Sunday law. So we know in putting things on a line upon line, we have the line itself, which is this line of judgment. That's what a line is. It's showing God's work, and judgment isn't always just a negative thing, because its judgment is connected to justice and restoration. And then the righteousness, these are the waymarks. So if we think about this, today men and nations are being measured by the plummet in the hand of him who makes no mistake. So these waymarks are measurements, right? That is, it's a plummet. And seeing if things are vertical, if they stand up straight. So people are being tested by these events that occur in history, in this line of judgment. When a message is given, it produces a line. All are by their own choice deciding their destiny. So your destiny is not decided by the events outside of you. They're not determined by fate. They're determined by your choice. And that choice is given you by God. Without God, there is no free will. It was kind of interesting on Thursday evening. I have this guitar student who's quite a talented guitar student. He's from Quebec, I think from Montreal. But we always end up having a discussion after his lesson about things, all kinds of things. He just always seems so fascinated by the stories I share about my life and so forth. And, his lesson ends at 6:30. On Thursday, he left at 20 after 9. So nearly 3 hours of us talking about things. And we talk a lot about religion. So he's quite interested in the chronology that I talk about and some of the research that I've done. And, we had a little bit of a discussion about free will, right? Because he says, well, all these things, like God knows all these things in advance. What does that say about our free will? And the fact that God knows the end from the beginning does not take away our free will. We have made a choice. God sits outside of time, and he knows what's going to happen. But God has given us free choice. The ability to choose is something that I believe it just couldn't exist without God. Otherwise, we would just be automatons. We'd just be the product of chance and nature and so forth if there was no God. So anyway, we have our own choice deciding our destiny. But God is overruling all for the accomplishment of his purposes. Now, these can seem almost contradictory. So we have this free choice, yet God overrules. So in what way does God overrule our free choice? So God doesn't take away our free choice. He's actually given it to us. But he's overruling all for the accomplishment of his purposes. And so, this can seem contradictory. But the way that I understand that he does it is because God has declared the end from the beginning, because God has given prophecy. His word is powerful. and it can direct. So when God promises something's going to happen, it doesn't take away the individual's choice, but it means that there is some power that God has that we can't understand, that even when people have free choice, he can determine the future, that his purposes will be worked out because his word is powerful. And as people believe his word, that word accomplishes a work. Now, Ellen White then talks about prophecy, right? So that's what, and whether this is all from one statement or whether it's, I'm not sure where this originally comes from. All that prophecy has foretold as coming to pass until the present time has been traced on the pages of history, and we may be assured that all which is yet to come will be fulfilled in its order. Now, this idea that things have this order, that these events are on a line of judgment, and that their waymarks are measured by a plummet, this is what this movement is about. It's understanding this principle, that the events of the past are being repeated. And prophecy has foretold things that came to pass. And we can see this in the books of history. And this gives us an assurance that God can determine everything that is still going to happen. Now, she then moves to this prophecy in particular. In the year 1840, another remarkable fulfillment of prophecy excited widespread interest. 2 years before, Josiah Litch, one of the leading ministers preaching the Second Advent, published an exposition of Revelation 9, predicting the fall of the Ottoman Empire. According to his calculations, this power was to be overthrown in AD 1840, sometime in the month of August. And only a few days previous to its accomplishment, he wrote, allowing the first period, 150 years, to have been exactly fulfilled before Deacozes. Now, it should actually be Deacozes, but the book he had a typo in it. And that typo has persisted. So Ellen White's just quoting him. She's not correcting it, but it's actually Deacozes. That's Constantine the 11th. So when he ascended to the throne by permission of the Turks, and that the 391 years, 15 days commenced at the close of the first period. It will end on August 11th, 1840, when the Ottoman power in Constantinople may be expected to be broken. This, I believe, will be found to be the case, and this is what happened. At the very time specified, Turkey, through her ambassadors, accepted the protection of the Allied powers of Europe and thus placed herself under the control of Christian nations. The event exactly fulfilled the prediction. A wonderful impetus was given to the Advent movement. So we say that this is the empowerment of the first angel's message. That's an impetus is. And now this is criticized within Adventism, and of course I've written lots about it, why these criticisms are faulty. And in some of the criticisms, they can be found in, which I address them in this paper. And I've never really gone into detail in this in presentations. I've addressed it in papers a bit. And some of the stuff, there's a lot of detail. For instance, the date that he starts with, July 27th, 1299, for the first woe. If you look at Wikipedia, they're going to say it's July 27th, 1301, right? So sometimes you'll see dates of 1302. And there is a Adventist scholar, trying to think of his name. I can't think of his name right now. But he does some research to show definitively that it is July 27th, 1299, that we have the beginning of the Ottoman Empire. Now, the Ottoman Empire, Turkey, recognizes that date, July 27th, 1299. But so there's a lot of details that need to be understood where there's these attacks against Josiah Litch's interpretation of this prophecy. And so many Adventists, because they don't have the resources necessary, and they trust the sources that they do have, Adventist scholarship, people like Heidi Hikes, has written a book called Satan's Counterfeit Prophecy, addressing the prophecy of Revelation chapter 9 and Josiah Litch's interpretation. I would have a really hard time, but he tries to do it, to take Ellen Whiteman's statement here, this remarkable fulfillment of prophecy, as being a satanic counterfeit prophecy, as Heidi Hikes tries to prove. But his arguments are faulty, obviously. Now, I'm just going to bring up this paper here. Just yeah. Bring up this. So again, I'm trying to take my time here, not just because I have 2 hours today to do this, but I really want people to take the time to think about these things. Normally, I tend to present things a little too rapidly, and I'm not sure why that's not working. Okay, let's try that again. There it is. So in this paper of mine called Josiah Litch's Prophecy, this is my revision of it. Okay, I'm going to address some of these things dealing with Uriah Smith's and Heidi Hike's Satan's Counterfeit Prophecy book. So I address those things. And so there's that statement again in the year.
Very brief. Story, Theodore. Could you very briefly explain why Hikes doesn't accept the 2520? Why he thinks it's a counterfeit, a satanic counterfeit at that?
The 2520 is not dealing with the 2520. He's dealing with Josiah Litch's prophecy. I don't know why Heidi. I mean, I'm sure he doesn't accept the 2520, but I don't know that he writes about it. But he does write about.
Sorry, I thought he was dealing with the 2520. Sorry.
No, so this is dealing with Revelation chapter 9. So this is the prophecy that ends in 1840, right? August 11th, 1840. Now, so Adventism has rejected this interpretation of Revelation 9 gradually. And that is, we know that August 11th, 1840 is a fulfillment of prophecy, but it's not truly the end of the Ottoman Empire. That is, you're not going to see that until, the 1920s, when there's no more Turkish Sultan. The last Turkish Sultan resigns, so the abolishment of the Sultanate is what people would look at as the end of the Ottoman Empire. Yet, that's not really what the prophecy is predicting in the way that people understand it. It's predicting when Turkey becomes under the control of the Christian nations. And that's going to happen when the ultimatum is delivered on August 11th, 1840. So part of the problem is that people don't understand the prophecy itself and how prophecy is fulfilled. So we have, what's the other example of, I'm trying to think of it. It's just escaping my mind right now. But lots of times people will look at, well, for instance, the 1260. There isn't 1260 years of papal persecution, right? The persecution maybe lasted 300 years. People have this type of criticism. Or, why 538 or 508, for the start of these various periods, that you could use different dates. Western Rome fell in 476. Why wouldn't you use that as the start? All different kinds of arguments like that. And especially when it comes to chronology and dates, people will often find some alternative date that somebody has for some event. So, they'll have, Artaxerxes' decree must have happened in 458, not 457, not fully understanding all of the arguments for it. Or, Jesus couldn't have been crucified in 31 AD, or, October 22nd, 1844 couldn't have been the Day of Atonement, things like that. So people will have all kinds of arguments. But one of the things that, one of the principles that we use when we study to find out the truth is you take all of the information and consider all of it. And we base our understanding upon the preponderance of the evidence. We don't pick or choose things that we like to prove some belief that we have. We use an objective approach. There's a typo in my paper. Should begin. Anyway, so when I began my process of studying chronology in relationship to the 2520, for instance, I wasn't trying to prove that the 2520 was correct. I was trying to see whether it was correct. I was trying to see, is there evidence for this? It makes sense, but if there's no evidence for it, then there's no reason for me to believe it. But often people approach things to prove something wrong, right? So they would look for evidence that 677 was not when Manasseh was taken captive. And if they find what they call evidence to show that he couldn't have been taken captive in 677, to them that settles the matter. All other evidence to the contrary is going to be ignored. And people do this in all kinds of things that they study. And we can't do that. We need to look at all of the evidence and say, what does all of the evidence say? We bring all the scriptures together. Now, when it comes to, of course, historical evidence, chronological, archaeological evidence, we know that the Bible is true. And so that all of the evidence needs to align to the Bible, and that the Bible has to, we can't have, for instance, things like the 65-year prophecy of Isaiah chapter 7. And I will just ask people a simple question. Okay, when is the 65-year prophecy? If you don't believe the 2520 and you don't believe, 742 and all these different things, when is this prophecy fulfilled? And they will just say, well, I don't know. It's, it doesn't matter. It's not important. It's not a major prophecy. Why is it there in the Bible within 65 years? Why is it given as an evidence? I mean, you have to have an explanation for it. Or Ezekiel's 390 years and 40 years. If you have no explanation for it, how can you criticize it? Revelation 8 and 9, if you don't have a fulfillment for it in the past, so people want to put it in the future, the trumpets into the future. I mean, that's really why they reject Ellen White's view. But there are some people who believe, parts of these things. They sort of are founded. Well, these are prophecies. They deal with Islam. They might accept that. But they'll just say that Josiah Litch was wrong. There's must be some other way to understand this. I don't know. I don't understand why this is such a difficult problem, because it is very clear that Ellen White says this is a fulfillment of prophecy. So anyway, in this paper, I address some of these criticisms of this. And I go through, the trumpets themselves. I've shown you this paper before. And there's some maps, which I borrowed from someone. I didn't make those maps. And then when we get to the 5 months, one of the things that I discovered is that there are 2 periods of 5 months. There's 250-year periods. So that was something that I discovered when I studied this. Now, there's also things about 5 months itself. This is the period of the time in which the locusts occur. So it's a symbol that relates to locusts, that locusts represent Islam. And so there's this period of 150 years that ends in 782 with the Treaty of Constantinople, and I document that. And then I show this period 632, that's Abu Bakr's command, to 782, that's 150 years. And then there's a period of 126 years and 391 years to July 27th, 1299. Now, the interesting thing about that is, and when we did look at this before, but in our going from June 9th to October 13th, there was 126 days, and that's followed by 391 and a half days to go to November 9th. So you can see that 126 and the 391 ended up in my study back in 2015 when I studied Revelation 9. So, and that's because of those 2 periods of 150 years. So these symbols that occurred in prophecies that I had been studying that had nothing to do with our timeline or, date setting or anything like that, the chronology of this movement, ended up as being a part of the chronology of this movement, which I just find fascinating that occurred. It wasn't something that, anybody, and that's one of the things I'm trying to show in going over this, is that we didn't start with this 126 years and 391, or 126 days and 391 days in our history, and then tried to force something in the Bible to fit to that, right? We studied Bible prophecy first, and that Bible prophecy, all of these patterns and structures and dates, ended up showing up in our history. So that was an important point, that if people could see how these things unfolded, how we came to understand certain truths, then they would get a better picture of what we're doing. But often they just know, our conclusions without understanding the process of how we came to those conclusions and how God unfolded these things step by step. Now, this part here, an hour, a day, and a month, and a year. So we know this is 391 years and 15 days. And I've done some study on this already in other studies. But I'm going to just give here something that Heidi Hike says. So Heidi Hike sums up in a strong rhetorical manner the position of Josiah Litch and the pioneers quite well, in spite of his objections to their interpretation of Revelation chapter 9. So here's what Heidi Hike says about this. The prophetic 391 plus 15 day years, claimed for the sixth trumpet had to commence on July 27th, 1449, as well, in order to precisely fulfill the total span allotted to the prophecy of 541 years and 15 days. That is, if you add the 391 to the 150, you get 541 years. And Josiah Litch begins it at July 27th, 1299, the 541 years, right? And then he adds the 15 days that leads him from July 27th, 1840 to August 11th, 1840. And he says, Heidi Hike says, that is because William Miller, Josiah Litch, and the Millerites combined the 2 claimed prophetic time periods together as one continuous whole. This then demanded that the prophecy be terminated, not only in the year 1840, but also on the very day of August 11th, as Ellen White recounted of the Millerites' belief and teaching at the time. Unfortunately, Josiah Litch overlooked one very important point in his calculation of the prophetic periods, as you all know. The Gregorian calendar of Pope Gregory XIII replaced the Julian calendar by a papal bull signed into effect on February 24th, 1582. When introduced, it immediately omitted 10 days in order to realign the calendar with the spring equinox, which was tied by the Roman Catholic Church to the celebration of Easter. The Millerites failed to take this 10-day discrepancy into account when they fixed the date for the termination of the sixth trumpet on August 11th, 1840. Many Seventh-day Adventists today do not remember or know that their history has been falsely colored with numerous apologies and adjustments until Josiah Litch's prophecy has become almost unrecognizable to the historian. It's almost as if we Adventists have picked and chosen what we want to keep and have disposed of what we don't. And that is exactly what Treyer blatantly does today. So he's actually responding to Dr. Alberto Treyer, and that's the guy's name, Treyer, however you say his name. That's what exactly Treyer blatantly does today, and it is all presented as fully supportive of the historical position. Incredible. So Heidi Heike's response. Now, when you read and you study into this in depth, Heidi Heike's is really just when somebody has incredulity here, right? This is an argument by incredulity. I can't believe that he actually believes that. The thing is, the evidence shows this, but Heidi Heike's isn't willing to look at the evidence or hasn't looked at the evidence. And we know that it isn't as simple as just adjusting for the Gregorian calendar, right? So remember when we looked at this in the past. So here we have, well, I use the Jewish Karaite calendar, but it's the biblical calendar. I don't use the Karaite calendar. So we look here at July 27th, 1299. We can see that it's the 26th day of the fourth month, Tammuz. And then the 26th day of the fourth month in 1840 is, and what you see here is you see the Julian on the bottom and the biblical on the top. And you can see how July 27th Gregorian lines up with July 27th Julian. So obviously, if he had adjusted that and he had taken the Gregorian date in 1299, it would have been August 3rd. And so he would have been off. But the biblical date lines up, right? And so we've looked at that. Now, Heike's isn't looking for that. All he's looking for is some way to tear down what Adventists believe on this point, even though he's an Adventist, right? So I write, Heike uses further rhetoric in referring to what he calls numerous apologies and adjustments. And this could be said of all the teachings of Adventism, in that we were given more light in our understanding of these prophecies after the disappointment. Also, many who are trying to support the pioneer position have been influenced by the errors of prophetic and scriptural interpretation that is used in the Protestant churches. As we have looked closely into the pioneer understanding of the trumpets, we find that there is much less that needs to be adjusted from the original understanding than many suppose. Obviously, there were a few things that the Millerites could not have understood, since they were looking for Christ coming so soon. For instance, the Millerites believed that the sixth trumpet ended on August 11th, 1840, and that the events of the seventh trumpet were to occur in the intervening period to the second coming in 1843. Obviously, as to this point, they were wrong. We understand that the seventh trumpet began to sound October 22nd, 1844, right? So obviously there are things that Adventists didn't fully understand, but often in trying to correct what people see as errors, we end up with this weakening of the truth because people are trying to align this to some, Protestant understanding, right? And that's Hykes is actually the one who's really making numerous apologies and adjustments. I mean, and we can see the parallel to this in something like July 18, 2020. Things don't happen the way that we expect. We go back and we try to reinterpret things instead of trying to understand them. Now, so I think it's important, and if anybody has questions or comments on this, feel free to make those comments. But when we look at this prophecy of, and we're going to go back to Revelation 9. So this hour, a day, and a month, and a year. So I've already addressed this before. Now we know that if we take a day, a prophetic day, that's 1 year, and a prophetic month is 30 years, and a prophetic year is 360 years, we get 391 years. Now this length of time that is used, we did the study on it. I'm just going to bring it back here again. This is what we looked at last time, and we're going to try to address some more regarding this. Okay. Is this 391 years, which is 142,810 days, right? It's actually 391 years, and if we divided it into 12, that is, if we looked at 391 months, 391 months is 1/12 of 391 years, right? Obviously. And that each one of those periods is 11,900 days. Actually, more specifically, it's 11,900 days and 1,190 minutes, right? So that is, if you take each of these periods, which I just put 11,900, I wasn't going to put all the decimals there. And each one of these is a cycle that relates to the Islamic calendar. So that symbol that addresses Islam, we know that it's going to be in Revelation 9:11. They had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon, right? And we know that relates to Ottoman, right? Because normally locusts don't have a king over them. There's a Bible verse. So here, let's go here. Take my time. So we know that there's that the idea that these are locusts, right? And they have tails like scorpions, and there's all this description of them. Here, I'm going to just go back here. So this is the first woe. The fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. So this refers to Muhammad in this symbol. And he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose a smoke out of the pit as the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. And there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth, and unto them was given power, as the scorpions of the earth have power. And it was commanded them that they should not hurt the grass of the earth, neither any green thing, neither any tree, but only those men which have not the seal of God on their foreheads. So this is Abu Bakr's command. So this is going to be in 632 AD that we have Abu Bakr's command. It's at the death of Muhammad, right? And to them it was given that they should not kill them, but that they should be tormented 5 months. So that's going to end in 782 with the Treaty of Constantinople. And their torment was as the torment of a scorpion when it striketh a man. In those days shall men seek death and shall not find it, and shall desire to die, and death shall flee from them. And the shapes of the locusts were like unto the horses prepared unto battle, and on their heads were as it were crowns like gold, and their faces were as the faces of men. And they had the hair as the hair of women, and their teeth were as the teeth of lions. And they had breastplates, as it were breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was the sound of chariots and many horses running to battle. And they had tails like unto scorpions, and there were stings in their tails, and their power was to hurt men 5 months. So this is the second period of 5 months, or 150 years, that we typically look at. And this is going to begin July 27th, 1299, right? And it says they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon. And then, so that's in 9:11. So we're going to have 9:11, that verse is going to refer to Othman. Now, the verse, see if I can find this quickly. Might not. I'm not sure where this would be. I can't even remember where this verse is. Yeah, it's Proverbs 30, verse 27. So we can see there's a symbol of the message to the Levites. The locusts have no king, yet they go forth, all of them by bands. So the idea about a locust is it doesn't have a king, right? But in Revelation chapter 9, these locusts are going to have a king, and that's going to be Othman, right? So that's going to be where we mark that period of 5 months. It's going to be the rise of Othman, and it's going to be referred to as the woe, right? The first woe. One woe is past, and behold, there come 2 woes more hereafter, right? Then the 6th angel sounds, and what we're going to see here is these symbols, which we don't generally address when we study this. But it says, I heard a voice from the 4 horns of the golden altar, which is before God. So this is the altar of incense. So I'm going to ask the question, why is the altar of incense, why is it being mentioned here in Revelation 9:13?
The Day of Atonement is preparing for the Day of Atonement, preparing for it.
Oh, okay. So we know that the trumpets are introducing an announcement of the Day of Atonement, right? That's the idea of a trumpet. The trumpets are being symbolized by the Feast of Trumpets.
Yeah.
Rosh Hashanah, right? So we're going to have here, when we go back to chapter 8, and we have the 7 seals open, that's the end of the seals, right? And then you're going to see in 8 verse 2. So for some reason, I don't know why they didn't put 8 verse 1 as the end of chapter 7 and 8 verse 2 as the beginning of chapter 8, but this is just the way they put the verse. And so I saw the 7 angels which stood before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets. And another angel came and stood at the altar, having a golden censer. So that's the altar of incense. And there was given unto him much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all saints upon the golden altar, which was before the throne. And the smoke of the incense, which came with the prayers of the saints, ascended up before God out of the angel's hand. And the angel took the censer and filled it with fire of the altar, and cast it into the earth. And there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and an earthquake. So there's some symbols here that address God's judgment. Now we know that the trumpets, the first 4 trumpets, are going to be judgments upon Western Rome, right? Because we're studying that in Daniel chapter 11. Now, what some people try to look at this, and why they want to put these trumpets into the future, is they think that this is the close of probation. That's what's happening with this censer being cast down, and that when the censer is cast down, that's going to be the close of probation. And then they take the similarities between the trumpets and the plagues, and then they say, well, the trumpets are still future, and those are just the same period of time as the plagues. This is the view that you will generally see within Adventism, some kind of idea that the trumpets are future. And so the historical application of the trumpets, they reject, right? So and that's the main basis for doing so, is taking that symbolism. So we can see when the trumpets are set up, we see a scene in heaven. Now, the thing is, we see scenes in heaven in chapter 1, which leads then to the messages to the 7 churches. And then we see a scene in Revelation chapter 4 and 5, which give this it sets up the scenes for the 7 seals, right? And then in Revelation chapter 8, verse 2, we see this other scene in heaven. Now, in the first scene, we see Christ standing in the midst of the candlesticks in chapter 1. In chapter 4 and 5, Christ is seated upon a throne, right? With a rainbow above his head. That's Christ's throne. That's in the holy place of the heavenly sanctuary. And this also is in the holy place of the heavenly sanctuary. That is, the golden altar, which is before the throne, is in the holy place, right? It's not in the most holy place. Now, it pertains to the most holy place. And so some people try to say, well, no, this is actually Christ ministering in the most holy place with the altar of incense, right? But it says he stood at the altar having the golden censer. And the altar itself is in the holy place, not in the most holy place. Now we're going to get the most holy place when we see the temple of God open and we can see the Ark of the Testament. So that's going to be, so we see this progression of moving through the sanctuary, so to speak. I mean, we start in the holy place. We also have in chapter 4 and 5 symbols that would relate to the altar of burnt offering as well. So there's going to be in that. So we see all of this furniture of the sanctuary progressively through the book of Revelation, right? And that's often missed by people who don't understand the sanctuary message, other Christians. They're going to take this sometimes as, like a literal temple that's going to be built in the future. There's all kinds of really strange things that they have, that Christians have in interpreting Revelation, but we can understand them as symbols representing Christ as our high priest. So this is in preparation for the Day of Atonement, which hasn't happened here yet. So this prophecy is not addressing something after the close of probation. So that's sort of the way that I would understand it. So then we're going to have the first 4 trumpets addressing the fall of Western Rome. And then we get the 5th and 6th trumpet that are going to specifically address the fall of Eastern Rome. And so we can look at this historically, and there's lots of different Protestant commentators from the past who understood this as referring to Islam. They might have different views about exactly where to mark the 5 months. And many just mark the 5 months from which 632 to 782, but they don't mark the other period of 5 months with Othman. And of course, you would need to do that because Othman is going to be mentioned, not by name, but as the symbol of the one who is the king over them, right? Hopefully that explanation is clear enough. So we have this, we have then, what's the other question here? Oh, okay. In 9 verse 14, so we answered verse 13, the idea of the horns of the golden altar. So that means he's at the altar of incense, and that's where the sixth angel is going to sound. There's going to be a voice heard from the four horns of the golden altar, which is before God, saying to the sixth angel, which had the trumpet, loose the four angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. Now, we know that the river Euphrates is relating to Babylon, right? We know that when Babylon falls, the river Euphrates was dried up, and we had the armies of Cyrus go into the city and go through the two leaved gates within the city to overthrow Babylon. Now there's a question. No, I don't think it does. Just the question Angela asks. I don't think it has anything to do with it, but I'm not going to go into that right now. Okay. So we have this river Euphrates. So the river Euphrates, relating to literal Babylon, relates to spiritual Babylon. And there are four angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. And these four angels, of course, are messages from God, right? And these are prepared for an hour, a day, a month, and a year to slay the third part of men. Now, what if we think about the fall of Babylon and we think about the river Euphrates, this is obviously dealing with Rome, not with Babylon itself. Okay. And especially when you think about Eastern Rome, which this is going to be, that's going to fall, we can see why the Euphrates is attached to that. Now, we're also going to see Euphrates mentioned in the plagues, right? So this is one of the connections that people have. They say, well, the sixth plague is the drying up of the great river Euphrates, and the sixth trumpet, there are four angels that are loosed which are bound in the great river Euphrates. Now, why does God do this? Well, how do we know that this is not the same event? Why does God do this? Why does he have the sixth angel attached to the river Euphrates and the sixth plague attached to the river Euphrates? What is God doing when he does this? Somebody has a good answer for that. Is he showing us a parallel? Can we say that they're parallel? There's something about using these symbols that they're parallel, but they're not the same. So for instance, we know that there's a seven-headed beast with 10 horns in Revelation 12. We know there's a seven-headed beast with 10 horns in Revelation 13. And we know there's a seven-headed beast with 10 horns in Revelation 17. Are they the same beast? They have some similarities, but are they the same?
No.
No, they're not. They're definitely not the same beast. One's a great red dragon. He has 7 crowns on his 7 heads. The one in Revelation 13, it's a composite beast. It has characteristics of the beasts of Revelation or Daniel chapter 7, and it has 10 crowns on its 10 horns. And it's not the same beast. It doesn't look the same. It has some characteristics that are the same. And then, of course, in Revelation 17, and we know the first one, pagan Rome, and the next one, papal Rome. But in Revelation 17, you have a beast, but it's being ridden by a woman. It's actually committing fornication with the beast. And this beast in Revelation 17 doesn't have any crowns. And we know it's not, the beast itself is not papal Rome. The woman is papal Rome.
She has the crown.
Yes, I guess in that sense, yeah.
So to speak, yeah.
Yeah. And she sits upon the 7 hills, well, which are well, she has the seven heads, or whatever, what is it? The seven, I gotta get this right. I don't want to mess it up. Yeah, seven heads. So the seven heads represent seven mountains upon which the woman sitteth. So those mountains are the hills of Rome, right? So it shows you that the woman is in Rome, it's the papacy, but is committing fornication with this beast, which is not Rome, right? It's the world, right? That beast is the world. So we have one beast that represents 7 heads and 10 horns, represents pagan Rome. Another beast with 7 heads and 10 horns represents papal Rome. And another beast represents the world, the kingdoms of this world that the woman is committing fornication with. And that woman is the papacy. It's a church, right? So, but people will often think, well, because they have 7 heads and 10 horns, it's the same beast. That is, the heads must be the same heads on each of the beasts. And we've shown that that's not the case. And that the horns must be the same horns. But that's not the case. Now, there's symbolism in the horns, why there's 10. There's symbolism in the heads, why there's 7. But you wouldn't say that they're the same heads. But that's what people tend to do. And so here with this symbol of Euphrates, the Euphrates River, it symbolizes something, and it's used in the 6th trumpet, and it's used in the 6th plague, but it's not really symbolizing the same thing. That is, it's not the same thing. It's the same symbol, but that symbol has to be applied and understood in the context of the vision itself, right? So we can say, well, the drying up of the river Euphrates in the 6th plague is going to be when the papacy loses its support during those plagues. And that's when Satan's personation of Christ will occur. The 3 unclean spirits, like frogs, come out of the mouth of the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. This event occurs because of the drying up of the river Euphrates. So this last ditch attempt of Satan to overthrow God's people who could be deceived, if possible, which they can't, but he's going to try. So the idea of the river Euphrates here is going to be addressing judgments that occur upon Eastern Rome. Now, we know that when we talk about these loosing of these, I just got to go to the verse there. These angels that are loosed, or these angels that are going to, these angels are going to be loosed. We also know that there's going to be 4 winds that are loosed, right? So we can see that those are also going to relate to Islam, correct? At least in part. So these 4 angels that are loosed, which are bound in the great river Euphrates, this is going to be judgments upon Eastern Rome. And they're prepared for an hour, a day, and a month, and a year, for to slay the 3rd part of men. And so that's going to be Islam. And it talks about the number of the horsemen. And I'm not going to go into all of that. But the one thing I do want to point out here is this idea, an hour, a day, and a month, and a year. Now, this is a way of specifying a time. That is, this prophecy here is saying that this period of time is specific. Now, we often don't realize this about a date. So when we think in our minds today, we think about, okay, a date. Let's say today's April 13th, 2024. It's hard to believe it's that far into the future, but it's April 13th, 2024. And right now it's, 7 minutes after 10. In specifying that time, what we are saying is that it's going to be, I would say, it's the 7th minute, the 10th hour, the 13th day, the 4th month, and the 224th year from some specific point. That is, it represents a span of time. Correct? That is, I'm measuring from some point in the past, a certain number of years, a certain number of months, a certain number of days, and a certain number of hours, and a certain number of minutes in order to say what time it is. So that is a span of time, is it not? I think somebody responded. I didn't catch them. I interrupted them. It's a span, right, Jeff?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but we don't generally think of it that way. We think of it as just the point that is now, right? That's how we think of time. We think, what time is it now? What is the date? What is the year? What is the month? Right? What is the time? But in the way that we record that time, we measure it as a span of time from a certain point in history.
Let's be talking about prophecy too. When you're referring to prophecy, it's talking about seconds.
Right. So if I'm talking about an hour, a day, a month, and a year, it is a specific date. Right? That's what's being told. And we know that that date is August 11th, 1840. Right? That's what it's referring to. But it has to start somewhere in order to give you a date. Because I could talk about a span of time that's 391 years, but I need to have some place from which to count it. I can't give you what that date is. If somebody says, well, tell me what date that is, what time, what hour, what day, what month, what year, on which calendar, which clock. Well, here in this context, we have been given the starting point. That starting point is with the first woe, when they have a king over them, Ottoman, right? There's a period of 150 years. And then we have a span of time from then. And now, we don't describe it that way. We don't say it's, what we do in a sense. It's year 391, right? And it's going to be whatever month you would count that from. You understand what I'm saying. That it is referring to a specific date. And what people often say is, well, this isn't talking about a span of time. This is just talking about a date, right? But it doesn't give us the date. But it does. Because it gives us the date in the description of what an hour, a day, and a month, and a year is. Right?
So, hey, this is your starting point, folks.
Yeah, but it's giving us, but it's giving us that date by understanding that an hour can be 15 days, that a day can be a year, that a month can be 30 days, and that a year can be 360. And that this is the period of the second woe. And we know when the second woe begins because it begins when the first woe ends. And so we could count that. And then we will come to a date on our calendar, which is the 840th year in the 11th day of the eighth month, right? So August 11th, 1840, we can come to that date if we understand that this span of time has this symbolic component in the way that it's described. Now we have an hour, a day, a month, and a year. Now we know if we eliminate the hour and we just take the day and the month and the year, we get that 391 and a half, right? So that period of time that we looked at in a bit of detail last time. Okay. And that we can see that we have 12 periods of 11,900 days and 1,190 minutes, and that will make 391 years, and that these calendars will line up in this particular way. And And that if we take a back tune, which is 144,000 days, and we compare it to 391 years, which is 142,810 days, so 144,000 days. And you see the difference is 1,190 days longer. So back tune is 1,190 days longer than 391 years, which is just very remarkable that we have all of these 11 nines in this prophecy. And so this means that this back tune, this period of 144,000 days, which we know relates to 144,000, and we know that July 18, 2020 relates to the Mayan calendar as a symbol. And this 391 years is also tied to it. We get this with all of these different symbols, we have them all tied together in our movement in particular ways. Now, I'll show you this. So I've talked about this a bit, but it's a little more interesting if you see it. So we know in 1969, February 11th, we were blessed with the arrival of Stephen Jameson into the world, right? So he's here. And Stephen, we actually, Dwight was not able to make it today because his mother is in the hospital. So I did doing sort of two presentations. But Stephen arrived into the world February 11th, 1969. And 32 years and 7 months later, or 11,900 days later, 9/11 occurred, right? So I'll just make it a little bigger, just like that. Now, Stephen didn't notice this. For some reason, I noticed it. I don't know why he didn't notice, because he knows about the 11,900 days as well. Now, we also know that if you count from November 9th, I think I'm going to do this right. So if we went, we put 2019 in here. I think this works. And you count 1,190 days, you're going to come to Stephen's birthday. Now, in 2023, so if we counted from 11/9 in 2019, we had come to Stephen's 54th birthday in 2023, right? February 11th, right? If we would have counted from 11/9 in 1989. All right, November 9th, 1989. We would come to February 11th, 1993. So that would have been his 24th birthday, right? 30 years difference. And so that means that Stephen's birthday attaches to 9/11 and 11/9 with the symbols that we have of 11,900 and 1,190, which is pretty remarkable, right? It definitely isn't chance.
It's
So-
not can't be a coincidence.
No, no, it can't be. And now
It's just-
Stephen is the one who discovered 1,190 minutes. What's that?
There's too many things that
Yeah, there's too many things that fit together. Now, in 1990, so back on October 13th, 2018, when I was doing that calculation of the 391 days, right? So I was doing this calculation. I knew it was the anniversary of my brother's passing. Now, in 2018, How many years was it since my brother passed away on October 13th, 1990? So that's the day my brother David died. He was killed by a drunk driver. He had stopped his motorcycle. He had just separated from his wife a couple of weeks before. She separated from him. And she didn't want to live in a camper on a work camp, with the two kids and him. And so he was married to my wife's sister. So Angela and Levine were sisters, and me and my brother David were brothers. And we married these two Van Wright girls. So, but he's going to, it's this Saturday. I remember that Saturday specifically because I went to the Spanish Adventist Church in Edmonton and ended up doing special music or something. I don't remember exactly what I did, but I didn't find out till the next day that my brother was killed by a drunk driver. So he was driving with my niece, who was 5 at the time, on his motorcycle. And he had bought a seatbelt for the motorcycle that day, I believe. And he was coming back from visiting he was witnessing to a Catholic priest. Anyway, he wanted a drink of milk or something, and he got off the motorcycle to get something out of the back of the motorcycle, and a drunk driver hit the motorcycle and him. And my niece was strapped to the motorcycle, and she went flying with the motorcycle. She was bruised, and I talked to her last summer about it. She remembers it like it was yesterday. She didn't see her dad get hit or what happened to him because she was strapped to the motorcycle. And the guy who killed my brother, he was the same age. They're both 37. Unfortunately, that guy committed suicide after he got out of prison for a year. So it's kind of a very sad story. But I remember my mom phoning me up the next day, October 14th, to tell me my brother David was killed. Now, so when we had that event, when I'm counting that 391 years and a half of the day, 391 days and a half a day, right? Based on the 391 and a half years from the kings of Judah, I know it's October 13th. I know it's the anniversary of my brother's death. Now it's 38 years. That's 2 Metonic cycles, right? You understand what I'm saying? So there's 2 Metonic cycles there. So it's going to be, it's 28 years, pardon me. So it's not 2 Metonic cycles. It's 28 years later, right? It would be nice if it was 38, but it's 28 years. But the date above that on the biblical calendar is the 23rd day of the 7th month. And that's a symbol, right? 723. We know it's early writing 74, where she talks about September 23rd. Now we know September is the 9th month, but it used to be the 7th month. And 723 BC. There's lots of 723s that occur. And obviously September 23rd is going to be 777 days before November 9th, 2019. And we also can see the symbol there in 723 of the message to the Levites. The 327 symbols are attached there as well. Okay, so there's lots of symbolism in that. Now, it's also the date that Babylon falls in 539. So October 13th, as a symbol, had already occurred in my life, and it addresses a death, right? In this case, the death of my brother. Now, my brother's wife, Angela, she passed away last year. And that, if we count from my brother's passing to the passing of his wife on May 13th, 2023, it's 11,900 days. So she passes away 11,900 days from the death of my brother, so her husband, and she never recovered from his death. It was she wasn't mentally well after he passed away. That was just, she wasn't really good at caring for herself or her children. Her children, my nephew and niece. My nephew was 10 when my brother died. He lived with us for a while. He lived with some other relatives, and just family friends raised my niece. She wasn't able to raise her own kids. She did end up having another child with some guy and did raise him. But it's a very, very tragic story. But the fact that it was 11,900 days, I think, is significant. Now, it's also significant because if we subtract 777 days, that's March 27th, 2021, the symbol for the message to the Levites. Now, of course, this is something in my personal life, right? It relates to me. I mean, doesn't mean a lot to you. You didn't know my brother David. I mean, one of his paintings on the July 18, 2020 study group, the main picture you see there of the guy on the camel, my brother painted that hangs in my living room. And I bought that picture from my brother back in 1983 or something like that.
Made a good picture for the page.
Yeah. My oldest son, when he was a little kid, called it Camel Man, yeah. So anyway, this is something personal for me, but we can see that it fits in with our lines. And so the death of my brother and the death of my sister-in-law, they are symbols. They represent something. And we know a woman dying, a woman represents a church, right? We see in Ezekiel, so let's go there. So Ezekiel is going to address the destruction of Jerusalem. And this goes back to what we were talking about, that in nations and in our individual lives, God has these purposes, right? There's these purposes. And I can't find it here, but I'll come back to that Spirit of Prophecy statement. God has purposes for nations and he has purposes for individuals. And he marks these out with these plummets, these judgments, these waymarks that are on this line of judgment. So this righteousness, this line of judgment, we have this line of righteousness, this waymark, and this is on a line of judgment. And so God illustrates these things in our personal lives. And so, people could interpret this in different ways. What often people will do is they say, well, who are you? Why are you so important that your birthday's, in part of this structure? Well, it's nothing to do with me being important. I'm definitely not a prophet. But I expect that all of us have things that God can witness to as symbols in our lives that can show that he is leading us and often reproving and correcting us in the events that occur, right? And these events are important. The death of my brother David obviously is an important event for me spiritually. He's the one who led me to be a Christian. And both David and Angela, Kelly Ross is the one that introduced Angela to my brother David. He met her at a bookstore when she's looking at Bibles, and he met her on a train and invited her over. And a week later, my brother proposed to her. So it ties together, Kelly Ross and Adventism and all these different things that happened in my life that impacted me to be the person that I am. And every one of us has had these types of events happen. Things have happened in our lives where we can see God's hand and that these things have shaped us. to understand the truths that we understand today. So the thing I wanted to look at here was in Ezekiel. So let's go there. Now, in the book of Ezekiel, we know that in chapter 4, he's going to make this prophecy in the 391 years and the 40 years, and they're going to be fulfilled in Ezekiel 24, right? In the 9th year, in the 10th month, in the 10th day of the month, the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, write thee the name of this day, even this selfsame day. The king of Babylon has set himself against Jerusalem this selfsame day, right? This bone day. Right. So he's marking this date. Now, the date is, as a symbol, is the 10th, right? Often, not always, but often the self-same day is the 10th day. Not in some situations it is. And I think that this is the 10th day of the 10th month is a significant symbol. But he's told to mark it, right? And remember, he's 500 miles away. He's not in Jerusalem. But he's told by God, the siege has begun this day, on the 10th day of the 10th month. And that is the case. That can be testified in other places in scriptures that that's when it occurred. Now, we know that there's still going to be a year and a half of this siege until the walls of Jerusalem come down and then Jerusalem is destroyed, right? And the temple, right? So the walls are going to come down or be breached on the 9th day of the 4th month, and then the temple is going to be destroyed on the 10th day of the 5th month. So it's another 10th day, another bone day. So then he's going to talk about this siege, but then he's given this prophecy. So also the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, behold, I take away from thee the desire of thine eyes with a stroke. Yet neither shalt thou mourn nor weep, neither shall thy tears run down. Forbear to cry, make no mourning for the dead. Bind the tire of thine head upon thee, and put thy shoes upon thy feet, and cover not thy lips, and eat not the bread of men. So I spake unto the people in the morning, and at even my wife died. And I did in the morning as I was commanded. So here he has a tragedy occur, the death of his wife. And he's not to mourn her. And she becomes a symbol of the destruction of the temple that's going to happen, right? Because that's going to be, and Jerusalem, but specifically, I think more the temple. In verse 21, it says, Speak unto the house of Israel, thus saith the Lord, Behold, I will profane my sanctuary, the excellency of your strength, the desire of your eyes, and that which your soul pitieth, and your sons and your daughters, whom ye have left, shall fall by the sword. So the destruction. What's that?
I'll say Aaron wasn't to mourn his sons either.
Yeah.
Probably a different situation there.
Yeah. But yeah, and this is here. So what's happening to Ezekiel is symbolic. The death of his wife is symbolizing the destruction of the temple that's going to occur a year and a half later, right? So that's going to be the 391 years and a half, right, from the beginning of the prophecy. So there's 391 years. He uses the prophecy of Josiah for the 390 years and the 40 years leading to this date. And then a year and a half later, the temple and the city are destroyed. God's, the sons and the daughters are going to be, fall by the sword. Now, another thing happens to him. And then he says, and your tires shall be upon your head, your shoes shall be upon your feet, right? You shall pine away for your iniquities and mourn one toward another, right? So you're supposed to, from this experience, it's supposed to cause repentance. Thus Ezekiel is unto you a sign. Well, Ezekiel in his actions of not mourning the death of his wife. And of course, his wife is part of him. That's part of the sign. According to all that he hath done, shall ye do. And when this cometh, ye shall know that I am the Lord your God, or the Lord God. Also, thou son of man, shall it not be in the day I take from them their strength, the joy of their glory, the desire of their eyes, and that whereupon their minds, they set their minds, their sons and their daughters, that he that escapeth in that day shall come unto thee, to cause thee to hear with thine ears. And in that day shall thy mouth be opened to him which is escaped, and thou shalt speak, and be no more dumb, and thou shalt be a sign unto them, and they shall know that I am the Lord. Now, this him being dumb, this is that Ezekiel is not giving a message regarding his people in this intervening time. So from the time that the siege begins until the escapee comes and reports to him that he saw the city destroyed, Ezekiel is, whether it's that he doesn't speak at all, I don't think that that's what it means. I think it means that he's not going to speak a word regarding his people. Now we know Ezekiel then is going to write chapter 25, and that's going to be Edom, Moab, Ammon, and Philistia, prophecies against them. And then chapter 26 and 27 are going to be a prophecy and a lament for Tyre. And then we're going to have the prophecy dealing with the prince of Tyre and the king of Tyre. So there's a prophecy of the prince of Tyre, a lament over the king of Tyre. So you're going to have 3 chapters on Tyre. And then you're going to have prophecies regarding Egypt. So the prophecy against Egypt, a lament for Egypt, and then a prophecy about Pharaoh being slain, and then a lament over Pharaoh in Egypt. So you have 4 chapters for Egypt, right? So none of these are addressing God's people. In chapter 33, it says, again, the word of the Lord come unto me, saying, Son of man, speak to the children of thy people. So here, he is now no longer dumb, right? And say unto them, when I bring the sword upon a land, if the people of the land take a man of their coast and set him for a watchman. So this is about the watchman. Ezekiel 3 is about the watchman. Ezekiel 33 is about the watchman. So this is a doubling of Ezekiel 3. So it's going to be, once again, that message that he's given in Ezekiel 3, he's going to be given in Ezekiel 33. And he's going to do this, he's going to begin speaking about his people. And then it's going to say in verse 21, and it came to pass in the 12th year of our captivity, in the 10th month, in the 5th day of the month. So remember, the temple's destroyed on the 10th day of the 5th month, but this is going to be the 10th month, the 5th day. That one that had escaped out of Jerusalem came unto me, saying, the city is smitten. Then he says, now the hand of the Lord was upon me in the evening before, or afore, he that escaped came, and had opened my mouth until he came to me in the morning. And my mouth was opened, and I was no more dumb. So he's saying, my mouth was opened before he came, but it was said that his mouth is going to be open in the day that he comes. And I use this verse to illustrate to people who, there are some people, such as lunar Sabbatarians, who argue that the day doesn't begin until morning, and that it's only the day that you're not supposed to work. So they have their Sabbath only as the daytime, not the night. I don't know if you know that about some lunar Sabbatarians. But anyway, we can see that it's in the day, but it's actually the evening before. So the day doesn't start in the morning, it starts in the evening, right? We can see this clearly. So his mouth was open in the day that the escapee would come. So in the evening, his mouth is opened. He's not dumb anymore. But it's not going to be until the morning that actually the escapee comes to him. So it's in the same day. So he would have known, once his mouth was open, that the escapee is going to come. that day, right? So it's an interesting little detail. Now, but it tells us something as well. So one of the things that we need to recognize is that as a movement, we have been dumb. But our mouth has to be opened. Right?
And we're a person of unclean lips.
Yeah, but yes, but remember, we don't do public evangelism, right? But there is a work that had to be done first for this movement. So the role of this movement was back in 2014, we're saying we're not doing public evangelism. And a lot of groups left the movement at that time. They said over that issue, right? They try to make it a righteous issue. So, Jeff says we can't preach the gospel to people, and that goes contrary to the spirit of prophecy. And that's not what was said, actually. Public evangelism, that means to bring numbers into our movement as if we are a church. That's not what we were to do. That wasn't the role of the movement. The movement was to actually give a message to Seventh-day Adventists. That's supposedly what it was supposed to be for. That's the work that we were supposed to do. But really, it was an internal work. We just didn't realize that it was not just because we have work to do to Adventists. We actually had a work to do for ourselves. When Paul was converted, he didn't become an evangelist right away. He had to learn. And this movement has to learn. And I believe we come to the point where we've had some events occurring in this movement that shows that another illustration that we have is a divorcement, right? So we have deaths symbolize something, but we also have a divorcement, right? And that's in Ezra chapter 10. So this is kind of the main part of the study. The other everything's just been an introduction so far. And in Ezra chapter 10, you're going to have this. Where does it start? Yeah. So, and the children. So they're going to have this divorcement from the strange wives, right? They meet on the 20th day of the 9th month in 457 BC. I think actually technically I'm trying to remember where the line changes from 457 to 456, but definitely when you get the first day of the 10th month in verse 16, that's going to be in 476, right? So it's passed into January. So they're going to have the divorcement, and the children of the captivity did so. So I guess if we start at verse 14. Now let our rulers of all the congregation stand, and let all them which have taken strange wives in our cities come at appointed times, and with them the elders of every city and the judges thereof, until the fierce wrath of our God for this matter be turned from us. Only Jonathan the son of Asahel and Jehaziah the son of Tikvah were employed about this matter, and Meshullam and Shabbathai the Levite helped them. And the children of the captivity did so. And Ezra the priest was certain of the chief of the fathers after the house of their fathers, and all of them by their names were separated, and sat in the first day of the 10th month to examine the matter. And they made an end with all the men that had taken strange wives by the first day of the first month. So they take this period of 3 months to rule on all of these marriages. And they're going to do it according to the law. That means that the wives have to be taken care of, right? They're not just casting them out, because that would really mean their death in many cases. Because a woman needs a husband to protect her and to care for her. So they're not just going to cast them off, but they are going to separate or be divorced, right? So it's a divorce that occurs. Now, So this idea of a divorce, we have understood that there's this symbol from the first day of the 10th month to the first day of the first month. And we're going to address it here. Now, we have done this, a little bit of this in our studies on Daniel chapter 11. And so I'm going to go to this slide here. Now, in Daniel chapter 11, we had looked at the Hebrew numbers in the phrase that talks about in those times. And we added them together. And we could count from 9/11, 8,248 days, to April 10th, 2024. So that was 3 days ago. So April 10th, 2024 was the first day of the first month. And it's 2,187 days to April 5th, 2030, which is also the first day of the first month. So it's a period of 6 years on the biblical calendar. And so the 2,187th day, April 5th, 2030, we have the symbol of July 18, 2020. If you count backwards, you can see 7, 18, 2, right? Not exactly backwards, because you're not going to, the 7th month, 81st day, you're going to go 18, but you're going to, and then you're going to take the 2 as representing the 2 for the 2020. Okay, so we had marked this out. Now, we also had connected this to the eclipse, because if we took my other Bible has for the Strong's number for the word those, it has H1990. And H1990, if we added that to the times and we counted from 9/11, it would bring us to the day of the eclipse. Now, what does the sun and moon represent? What do they symbolize?
For signs and seasons.
Okay. So signs and seasons. What about in the story of Joseph in his dream? One of his dreams. What does the sun and moon represent?
His mother and father.
His mother and father, right? A husband and a wife. Okay. And so, the sun would represent the husband, the wife is the moon. She reflects the glory of the husband, that type of idea as an illustration, right? And so we can see that there's symbolism in there of a husband and wife in an eclipse, right? Just that idea. Now we know it, of course, it also represents their signs for the times of the seasons. And, we addressed a little bit about the eclipse, why I didn't think it was super significant as far as what people out there in the world were expecting. But it does relate to our lines. And of course, April 8th means something to me personally. So again, it's something that personally means something. And it is my 11th wedding anniversary. Now, this is a difficult thing to talk about in a study, but some people know that, my wife is not well. She has some mental health problems, and she's been gone for 4 months. And so it would be a very painful thing for me, obviously, with her not here on our 11th wedding anniversary. And her birthday was April 11th. So again, her not being here. And the year that we got married in 2013, the calendar was the same, at least from March 1st onward. So, Easter fell on March 31st back in 2013. And we got married in that period of time. So there was a lot of memories I was going through, and of course been praying for her that she's going to recover. And I did mention when I was at the rec center yesterday, not yesterday, was it yesterday? Yeah, it was yesterday. I was talking with the lady at the counter, and she knows the place where my wife is, and she knows the people there personally. She's been friends with them. And so she said, she's in good care and should be cared for. So that was comforting. But the point is, when I think about these symbols here, in my own personal life, the death of my brother, the death of my sister-in-law. And also we know in my first marriage that relates to these lines as well. Now, the main study that we were doing yesterday with the brother from Hung from Vietnam was a study on the 3,291 days, right? So this is something that I call the 777 chiasm. So we're all familiar with the 777 days on the right side on the bottom, or at the top, I guess, too, from November 9th, 2019 to December 25th, 2021. And in relation to the Mayan calendar, this is the date that Heidi and I first met. Well, at least officially. I mean, I know I've seen her in the past because she was a Seventh-day Adventist. I'd seen her at camp meetings. She saw me playing guitar, stopped and listened to me probably when she was a teenager. But we met, officially introduced at a Bible study that I was giving on the 2520 on December 21st, 2012. And that was the day that the Mayan calendar moved to that 130000, which is 1,872,000 days from the start of the Mayan calendar. So we did that study last week. And there's 777 days to my 52nd birthday and 52 solar years. Obviously, my 52nd birthday is compared to the from 52 prophetic years. The difference is 273 days. So you can see up here in the top that, whoops. You can see there, here's December 21, 2012. I meet my new wife, but we're going to get married April 11th. That's going to be 108 days after we meet. And then she's going to turn 34 on April 11th in 2013. But you can see the 777 days to my 52nd birthday. And you can see that if I go from my birth 18,720 days, it brings me to May 9th. Now, that would have been my 33rd wedding anniversary with my first wife. But she was engaged to be married prior to me even meeting Heidi. So anyway, that we have this anniversary date from my first marriage. And we noticed that May 9 is also April 26th on the Julian calendar. But then there's 273 days to when I turned 52. And that structure we already had in this period of time. So there's 504 days. I don't have it shown here. Where is it? I think I have it down in this. No, I don't have it drawn on this chart. But we know that there is from March 27th, 2021 to December 21st, 2021, there's 273 days. March 7th represents 273. And there's 504 days. That's 252 times 2 from November 9th, 2019 to March 27th, 2021, here at March 27th, 2020 on this chart. Because that was addressing 2,730 days. But anyway, another symbol of 273. So we have this chiasm. And it was this chiasm that I sent to Jeff on April 26, 2020, showing that one is there is a failed prediction regarding, the end of the world. It didn't end on December 21st, 2012. My world began when I met Heidi. And then 777 days later, I turned 52. And then there's this other date, March 27th, 2017. Now, I didn't put it in here, but this date on the biblical calendar is the 25th day of the 12th month. So it symbolizes December 25th, right? Now we know on this side, December 25th, 2021 is the end of this 777 days. And then we have this September 23rd, 2017, where I present July 18, 2020 as a symbol of the prediction before midnight, that this movement was trying to understand about a prediction that we are going to make, and that's 777 days before November 9th, 2019. So there was all of these things here. I even have some stuff dealing with the solar eclipse in 2017 in here. So there's a lot of symbols in here. Now, where, the reason why the study that we did yesterday, so I was just answering this question regarding the 3,291 days. Because he wanted it was in our study dealing with the book of Judges, right? So that was this study here. That's what he asked about, because that's what we've been going through, the Telford Muse studies. And so we addressed this, the 3,291 days. When the two lines of Jotham are joined, so I'm not going to go into all that, it completes 3,291 days of the 7/7 chiasm. The bramble is 329, which relates to the 329 days from October 13th. So we get back to that October 13th date, 2018 to September 7th, 2019, which holds March 27, 2019 as its center date. The Levitical chiasm was the template for the 777 chiasm. March 27, 21 is 777 days prior to May 13th, 2013, which is 504 days from December 25th, 2021. And this date completes a chiasm with July 18 as its center. While it may not mean much to others, it is the date of my sister-in-law Angela's death, which was 11,900 days, 32 years and 7 months from the death of her husband, my brother David Lynn Turner, on October 13th, 1990. Remember that 391 years is 12 periods of 11,900 days and 1,190 minutes. 11,900 days, 1,190 minutes times 12 is 142,810 days, or 391 solar years, and is 1,190 days shorter than 144,000 days. The two periods of 1,029 days for each side of the chiasm are 47 weeks, or 3 times 49 weeks each. And this is this picture. How do I turn this to the right? There must be a way. Rotate. Size and position. Yeah. So I got to rotate this somehow. There it is. Is there just some way I could rotate the whole screen around? Just like the whole, instead of doing it like this? Is there some way that I could just get this? I know I can with a PDF.
You see that little round thing on the left there?
Well, I can do this. That just changes the picture, but then it, it doesn't really, well, I guess I could do this. I'll just go view. That's not view, it'd be layout, orientation. Guess I could do it that way. Okay, so we can see the whole picture now. And so what we have is in 2013, for some reason I don't have the date there. I don't know why that date didn't get included. So there should be a date there in 2013 that I marked. But I'll do it this way. There it is. So that's going to be from, yeah, the Mayan calendar. So that's just showing you what we have here. Okay, so that's going to be the December 21st, 2012. And you can see that what we have is the 7 years to November 9th, and then the 777 days, right? So there you just see this. And this is going to relate to all these different dates in 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18. This is going to address here the olive, the fig, the vine, lots of different things. The point is that that's what we were looking at. Now, in doing that, I came to this conclusion that this is kind of what I'm wanting to show you here. So we addressed all of these symbols. But when we come to this, the question is, what does April 10th, 2024 represent? Can we say that the divorce has been completed? It was done according to the law, but there's this divorcement between who? We said that it has to do with this movement to divorce from its strange wives.
I don't remember what Mark's at.
Well, it's going to be the end of Collins.
It wouldn't be strange doctrines, would it?
Yeah, but it's going to be connected to Collins' symbol. So that, right. So we had 880 or 88 months from Collins, the end of Collins' prediction, to April 5th, 2030, which is the first day of the first month. And we said that's the period of time that's given to us.
Would it be called strange teachings?
Yeah, yeah. Well, the strange wives. Yeah, it's the wrong method of study, right? And we also connected it to December 25th, 2021 or 20. Yeah, what was the date? Just hang on. Yeah. So we connected it to 2022, December 25th, 2022. Right. So was this invitation made. And that's going to be the first day of the 10th month, right? Literally. Yes. So Iran is referencing the idea that Jeff Pippinger's to cut off anyone who disagrees. It appears to be consistent. And that's what I'm saying is that the movement itself has chosen to divorce from this message. So this divorcement is not something that we wanted. We did everything that we could. And this is where some personal things come in, because in my first, yeah. So in my first, what's that?
Go ahead.
So in my first
I was
marriage,
gonna say divorced or Miller's rules.
okay, divorce from Miller's, right? So in my first marriage, I was divorced. Now, I don't believe in divorce. I never pursued a divorce. I did everything to try to stop from being divorced. But there was nothing I could do about it. It was something that was beyond my control. And I got divorced in 2011, separated in 2004. 2004, got separated and divorced in 2011, about 7 years later. But I sought everything I could do to restore that marriage. I didn't sign divorce papers. I never filed anything, like a separation agreement or anything like that. And sometimes that happens. There's a person who just does not want to be married to you anymore. And with my first wife, she was a wonderful person. She just didn't want to be an Adventist anymore. And she knew how much I was an Adventist, and being married to me, she had to, make a decision, and her decision was to end the marriage. So, it's a very personal thing. And my goal was never to be remarried. I'm not really a fan of people just getting divorced and getting remarried. And so the circumstances regarding me getting remarried, again, not something I was looking for, but Heidi had no one to care for her. And so, God definitely demonstrated that I was to marry her, and it was in his providence, and we can see it's a part of these lines. But a divorce has occurred. And for me personally, there's been a separation in this second marriage. And I hope it doesn't lead to divorce. I hope Heidi heals and gets better and comes back. But it's not something I have control over. And I do believe that just because there is a divorce in this movement, it doesn't mean that individuals are not going to come back to the truth. This is not a judgment or a criticism of any person. It's just the reality that is being illustrated in these stories. And, the death of my brother, the death of my sister-in-law, the symbolism there, and the births, right? Those things are important symbols. My third son, Micah, was born April 19th, 1985. And the next day we had the first upper room Bible study. And that April 19th date, kind of sticks in my mind a little bit, is familiar. But all of us have experiences. And I'm trying to find this quote here again that I had. And I don't know why it disappeared, but here it is. So this was taken from Maranatha, the May 24th date that you would read this. And, the history of nations that one after another have occupied their allotted time and place, unconsciously witnessing to the truth of which they themselves knew not the meaning, speaks to us, right? So we know that God is working in spite of the fact that people are aware of it. And this is true of nations. To every nation and to every individual of today, God has assigned a place in his great plan. He has a place for each one of us. Today, men and nations are being measured by the plummet in the hand of him who makes no mistake. All are by their own choice deciding their destiny, and God is overruling all for the accomplishment of his purposes. All that prophecy has foretold is coming to pass. Until the present time, all that prophecy has foretold is coming to pass until the present time, has been traced on the pages of history, and we may be assured that all which is yet to come will be fulfilled in its order. It's written on a line. It's measured by the plummet, these waymarks of righteousness. And this prophecy in Revelation 9, it speaks to this movement, it speaks to nations, and it speaks to us as individuals. And it's something that we really need to recognize, is that this is not some game that we are playing with numbers and dates, that we are actually watching the hand of God working in our lives in the past and in the present, showing that we are part of his purposes and plans, and that we have a work to do. Maybe the escapee hasn't come and returned from the destruction of Jerusalem yet, but I do believe that we need to begin to speak, and that God is laying before us a work that we have to do. The divorcement has happened, I believe, and yet we have a work to do. And it's something that God's going to be leading us in the future, this year, showing us this. And we also had, some other stuff dealing with Daniel 11, verse 36, which is 82,499 days, or the lexical number is. And we also had that, so I'm just going to show you this really quickly. Yeah. How did I do that? I can't find it right now. Anyway, I'm not going to worry about it. So, because we're running late. So thanks everyone for this study. Think about these things. Think about how God has led in the past and what he's doing in your life. And what he's calling you to do in the present, to make a choice. And that choice is going to decide your destiny. So let's close with prayer. Dear gracious Heavenly Father, we are so thankful for your word, for your comfort, and we pray for one another. Lord, you know the struggles and the trials that we face, the people we care for, and their trials. We pray for Dwight and his mom, trial that they are facing. And we pray for our loved ones. I pray for my wife, Heidi, that you can bless her, that your angels can watch over her, and that you can continue to bring people into her life that will help her to heal from this setback. And I pray for each person who's watching these videos and that participates and that's searching for truth, that you can care for them, that they can know that you care for them. I pray for my guitar student, and I pray for the people that are going to be coming tomorrow, that I'll be witnessing to. I just ask, Lord, that you can help each one of us as we minister to those around us, that we can be ministered to by your Spirit, by obeying your voice. Thank you, Lord, for hearing our prayer, and in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.